Hi, Mike here. You're watching Scout Restoration Yukon. In this video, I will restore the Holley 1904 carburetor for my 1966 Scout 800. I hope you like it. Let's get to work. If you want to help, please subscribe to Scout Restoration Yukon. It's free. Mike Morrow, over and out. Hi, Mike here. You're watching Yukon Scout Restoration. Today, we'll be restoring the carburetor for a 1966 International Scout with a 152 slant 4 engine. This is the Holley model 1904 single barrel carburetor, well known for its simplicity, durability, and ease of maintenance. It was manufactured from 1952 to 1968 and was used in many cars and trucks. However, nowadays it's no longer available, although kits can be purchased, but many of the parts are impossible to find. Let's get to work. I previously dismantled this carburetor and found that it had already been rebuilt. However, the accelerator pump diaphragm and gasket were glued to the carburetor body. At the time, I didn't have a new accelerator pump, so I put it back together until I got the parts. I'm inspecting the throttle body for damage to the gasket surfaces, proper throttle plate alignment, excessive throttle shaft bushing wear, and if the throttle linkage bracket is loose on the shaft. If so, it must be braced. Removing and inspecting the idle adjusting screw and spring. This gasket is good. Removing the float ball. These float balls are notorious for warping. I will replace this float ball with a super rare glass float ball. They don't warp. Removing the economizer diaphragm assembly. Removing the accelerator pump discharge nozzle and washer. Removing the fuel inlet seat, screw, and washer that secures the needle and seat and float assembly. Note that there's a second washer on the inside. Checking the poppet valve on the choke plate. This allows some air in during cold start situations. It's easier to loosen the main jet before removing the main well. The main well has 2 long screws and 3 short screws. This is the accelerator pump return spring. This is the cam that actuates the accelerator pump push rod. It's plastic. When I push on the pump rod with a screwdriver, the accelerator pump should just fall out of the carburetor. However, someone has glued it in there. I don't want to risk damaging the carburetor body. so I will soak it overnight in carburetor cleaner. After soaking, I will rinse it with warm water and then blow everything out until it's dry with compressed air. Now I'm spraying carburetor cleaner into the various air and fuel passages in the carburetor body. I will let that sit for a while before blowing it out with a low pressure blowgun. This is the accelerator pump nozzle passage. Blowing out the high-speed bleed and idle system passages. I blow all the passages in both directions. This is the distributor vacuum advance passage. This is the economizer diaphragm vacuum passage. This is the main well with the economizer or power valve. There are two different pump diaphragm assemblies. The difference is the length of the pin. To ensure that I have the right part, I must measure the length of the pin. They are the same. I am showing this with the old accelerator pump. To remove the sleeve from the push rod, press the spring and remove the retaining ball. To reassemble, hold with the flat up, install the spring and sleeve until the flat spot appears and drop the retaining ball into place. I am spraying the accelerator pump, diaphragm and gasket with silicone lubricant so that it will not stick to the carburetor body. It's important to check that the steel balls are still in the main well. This is a rebuilt main well. This is the accelerator pump return spring. I am now installing the main well. It's important to hold the main well down. Run the screws in without tightening. Then work the accelerator pump in and out to make sure it's centered before final tightening. It's also important to use a screwdriver that fits the screw perfectly. The main jet doesn't have a washer because it's a tapered fit. Installing the main jet in the main well. I spray silicone lubricant on these gaskets so they don't stick. Installing the new economizer or power valve diaphragm. Before final tightening, I'm cycling the rod back and forth a few times to make sure everything is centered. At idle, the economizer diaphragm is at rest. This is low vacuum. When the carburetor is accelerated, the higher vacuum acts on the diaphragm, which lifts the rod. allowing the power valve to open, supplying more fuel to the engine. This is the float balance spring. It prevents the float from bouncing on rough roads. Installing float hinge pin. To check for float leakage, I submerged it in water to look and see if any bubbles appear. This is the float inlet retaining screw and washer. The second washer goes on the inside between the inlet and the carburetor body.
I've placed the carburetor upside down in a piece of pipe in order to set the float level. The float should be parallel with the float bowl. We'll just like to adjust the float a little bit. So what I'm going to do is bend this tang down a little bit with my needle nose pliers. I'm going to bend it down a little bit more. You can see now that the float is parallel to the float bowl when it's in the upside down position. So that should be good. Now I just have to put the glass float bowl back onto the carburetor.
This is an extremely rare glass float bowl. They don't warp. The other float bowls warp, usually from over-tightening. I tighten these screws very lightly. Later on, if the float bowl leaks, they can always be tightened up some more.
The throttle body is cast iron. The carburetor is zinc. Because of the different thermal expansion rates of the two metals, the screws have a tendency to come loose. That's why I'm using Loctite non-permanent thread lock on the screws. I tighten these screws as tight as I can get them. I'm polishing the idle mixture screw with fine crocus cloth. Excellent! I am gently turning the idle screw in with my fingers. When it bottoms, I will adjust it one turn out. Later, when the engine is running, I will fine-tune this screw. Accelerator pump, discharge, nozzle, screw, and washer installation. Fuel inlet fitting and washer.
I'm installing the carburetor onto the engine utilizing two flat washers and two 5/16 National Fine nuts. This is just a temporary installation because later on when I install the engine, I will remove the carburetor to avoid damaging it. Usually have to hold it up to start the other nut.
$19.04 Holly single barrel carburetor ready to go.
In conclusion, I think this will be a good carburetor. The new accelerator pump and gasket should do the trick. The rare glass float bowl is a bonus. In my next video, I will fabricate 4 heavy-duty jack stands. I hope you like it. If you want to help, please subscribe to Scout Restoration Yukon. It's free. Mike Morrow, over and out.